of CBT in managing depression and loneliness. And I don't know, Amy, would you like to just briefly refer to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely CBT is known to be an excellent treatment for depression. There's a lot of evidence around that. And, you know, working with people using CBT does help to look at loneliness, particularly through the behaviour piece of CBT. So behavioural activation is a term that we use to describe getting out, getting active, engaging with things. So, you know, that piece around social prescribing, kind of all the pieces I spoke about in terms of kind of, you know, group engagement, that's all kind of covered within CBT. So absolutely CBT, if you focus it correctly, can be very helpful in addressing loneliness.
Yeah, and I think the talk that'll be on next week is going to focus on some aspects of cognitive behaviour therapy. Carol Keegan, who's here at the back of the audience, is going to be presenting there, and I think it'll be a really interesting piece that will open up the role of CBT in anxiety. It's also relevant in the whole area of depression. It's no accident that two of our topics and two of our leading topics in the series this year relate to depression and anxiety. These really are big ticket items when it comes to mental health and well-being. So I think it's important really that we think about them and open up these areas a little bit more in our presentations.
Excuse me further, could you comment, either of you, on the difference between dialectical behavioural therapy and CBT?
Sure. Yeah. Dialectical behaviour therapy and CBT are two very commonly spoken about therapies. Amy, do you want to talk to those?
Yeah, so dialectical behaviour therapy is a more modern therapy. It combines elements of mindfulness and CBT. It's often more focused on emotional, what we call dysregulation. So difficulties where emotions are very intense and feel often like the person feels that they're not really in control of their emotions. So there are elements of CBT, but it's also much more kind of practical, skill-based work in order to kind of manage emotions in a different way.
Yeah, and I think CBT was the original of the species, and since the 60s, it has evolved into a broader school of cognitive-based therapies that really do bring an awful lot of good and are very evidence-based in terms of the change that they can bring. But, you know, and maybe just to hold one of the core themes that I heard in Amy's talk tonight, that that importance of human connection, of being present to each other. And, you know, we in psychology prize ourselves on being evidence-based scientific practitioners. So we need to see the hard evidence for what we do in order to do it. Consistently in research, one of the key variables in terms of positive outcome in therapy, you know, we would say, it must be the mode of therapy, which is very important. But one of the key solid pieces is the quality of relationship that happens between therapist and client. So again, it's back to this idea of human connection. In there lies social connection, lies bonding, lies healing, lies a way that can be found between two people to make things a little bit better or more tolerable. So this is a really important one, this idea of people being present to each other and the potency of that in terms of well-being. So back to our questions. Just a question, Amy, about the social prescribing.
Yeah, so someone was asking about the All Ireland's social prescribing website. So it is a really good initiative. As I said, you know, this talk was something I was originally supposed to deliver in 2020, but then the pandemic arrived. So in reviewing it and looking at what's changed in the 3 years, one of the biggest and most positive changes I found was social prescribing was really in its infancy in 2020. But now there is this excellent website that actually has all these lists of social prescribing services. And I mean, they're countrywide. They're not just all in Dublin, they're everywhere. And, you know, some of them are run by volunteers, some of them are run by, kind of out of GP practices, some of them are, established within kind of the HSC, but they all serve the same purpose. So there is a great option out there. And, if you go to that website, look at what's in your local area, it'll give you information about how to contact the nearest service to you and whether it's something that you need to be referred to or whether you can self-refer. It's different in each area, but in Dublin, which I'm guessing most people here are probably from, there are lots and lots of options available, and it is an excellent service. I would strongly recommend having a look at it.
So, here's a fairly broad question, but maybe, Amy, if you'd like to offer some thoughts in terms of working from home and the impact of that on social connection and mental health.
Yeah, this is a really good question and something that I think we're going to learn a lot more about in the coming years. It's such a transformative thing, and in so many ways it's been really beneficial to people's lives, but it's such a new development, the idea of working from home. Certainly there is a level of disconnection that people can feel from being online and not seeing people in person. They talk about the idea of the water cooler moments where, you're kind of seeing people and you have those quick chats about things and a lot of things that, kind of make the day a little bit easier and information that you possibly wouldn't have access to without seeing someone in person. So I do think it is going to have an effect on people's mental health, positive and negative, like everything. I mean, the idea of not having to commute several hours a day, 5 times a week is going to have a huge benefit for some people. But there is a need to also look at the fact that the isolation of that can be challenging. So making an effort, I think the current policy for a lot of companies is to be in the office 2 to 3 days a week. And I would say that at least being in the office part-time is probably of benefit to people just for that sense of social connectivity. I think it's a really interesting area, but there's a lot more research to be done on that at the moment.
I think we have a group of questions that really tap into a very personal account of the pain of loneliness, of loss, of moving through life and the impact that the changes that the passage of time brings in life. But I don't know, Amy, I know some of the words that have come up in that are around shame and isolation and hopelessness, which are, really, really understandable experiences that would come under this conversation we're having. Would you have any thoughts or comments in relation to that, Amy?
Yeah, I think it's a really strong theme that people, resonates with people. It feels very, when we talk about feeling isolated, it's being alone. So you don't have any reference for the experience that you're having. Everything you think is, magnified by the shame and the sadness that you're feeling. And as I kind of was saying in my talk, it's really important to recognise that actually it's quite a ubiquitous sensation. Being alone, feeling lonely is very much something that everyone has felt at some point in time. And it is something that we all share. So, it's that slide that it talks about kind of loneliness. The irony of it is that everyone feels alone at times. So it's important to remember that even if you do feel isolated, that you're not the only person who feels like this, and that it can happen to anyone at any stage in life. You can be hardworking and, consumed with various things at various points in your life. And when you actually turn around, you realize that people are a little bit further away than you thought. You're not alone in that. And I think the big piece, and kind of I talked about a lot at the end, is the idea of self-compassion. So, being compassionate towards yourselves, recognizing that this isn't your fault, that it is something that happened, that's an important step to changing it. The more we beat up on ourselves, the harder it is to motivate ourselves to change something. So I think being able to take that step back and actually talk to ourselves the way we would talk to someone else that we care about can help reduce that sense of shame. And from there, then it's important to work forward from that. And, there are obviously professional supports out there if it feels like that is becoming too big a problem for someone to deal with by themselves.
And one of the thoughts linked with that, Amy, was the idea of how do I accept what's going on in my world if there's a lot of isolation and loneliness. What would you say to that?
So I think, there's a concept from DBT or dialectical behavior therapy called radical acceptance, which is this kind of sense of trying to wholeheartedly accept the problem as it is. So the first step to change is accepting that there is a difficulty or a problem there. So being able to radically accept or wholeheartedly, accept that there is a problem allows you then to do something to change that. If you fight against it or you beat up on yourself for there being an issue, you're not going to ever have the energy to do something with it. And again, it's remembering, look, it's a universal experience. As much as it might feel like a very, very lonely journey, it is actually, ironically, something that everyone has had happen at some point in their lives. So it's important to try and accept and then move forward.
So is it that this situation may not have been my choice or of my making or what I would have wanted for myself, but this is how it is today, and I'll live with that and step forward from that place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you keep fighting against or beating up on yourself, you're never going to change the problem. So accepting that there is a problem and then looking to find a solution, that's how we move forward from this.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Just, I see a couple of questions here as well, asking about having religion or faith and belief in your life. Does that have any contribution to make to overall well-being and connection?
Absolutely. There's so much research out there about the importance of faith, spiritual beliefs, religion, and how that provides a sense of psychological resiliency and well-being as a result. So having a religious faith or a spiritual belief is an incredibly helpful thing when dealing with loneliness, because you're not alone. If you have that belief system, there is always God or whatever it is that you believe in that's there for you. So there's a lot to be said for that. And the community that's created from religion, being part of a religious community, again, like we talked about, being part of a group that has meaning for a person is really important. So if you have a spiritual faith or a belief or a religion, that gives you a community already, a group of people who all identify in the same way as you. So it's a very powerful resource and a tool if it's something that someone has.
Yeah, and I suppose having that sense of that there's more, and that there's that sense of existential, there's much more to just my world and my life than where I'm at in this moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, and I'm conscious of our time, so I guess we'll have to wrap things up, but I know there was a question that wondered what's going on in Japan. They seem to have it made. And there's a really interesting series on Netflix, if you're into Netflix. I'm not sure of the title of it, but it relates to a companion book, the title of which is The Blue Zones. And there are pockets around the world where there is longevity built into the communities, where people live well into their hundreds in the years, so way over 100 years of age, and it's a very common thing. And they try to distill what is going on there. And again, what do you think it is? Human connection. Diet and other things like that are important, but human connection is the big factor. And I think in Japan, that's one of the ones that they have, that family and community is really, really strong. The people there have a purpose. They get up and they get out and they're in the garden and they're pulling vegetables and they're doing all sorts of things that keep them connected and rooted to who they are as individuals, who they are within their family system, who they are in their community. So that's something that the social prescribing is trying to facilitate and encourage. Culturally, we may live our lives very differently in the Western world, but I think anything that's going to foster and nurture human connection seems to be something that'll leave us on to a bit of a winner. So get out there, folks. We're doing it here, of course, which is great. But get out there and connect and engage and put yourself forward. Dare to step forward and do something fresh and new and different, because you're going to reap the benefits of it. So thank you all for your attention. In the spirit of human connection and gratitude that Amy has spoken about, I would like to say a real heartfelt thank you to Amy. for what she has brought here tonight. I think she's opened up lots of different ideas and thoughts. This is what Amy does. She does this every day. I hear people around the hospital and they all want a wee bit of Amy.